Thank you so much for listening to the novel. I truly hope you enjoyed this dark, addictive werewolf romance. If you did, don't forget to check out another popular story on this channel, Sold to the Lycan Prince, a powerful, emotional, and unforgettable paranormal romance you won't want to miss. Please subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share this audiobook to support more stories like this. Your engagement helps the channel grow and allows more listeners to discover these incredible worlds. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to share the next story with you. Chapter 1, Fateful Encounter. The gala lights shimmered like distant stars against the polished marble floor, their reflections dancing across the crystal chandeliers above. Evelyn Hart adjusted the strap of her gown and smoothed the fabric, though her attention was elsewhere, her mind consumed by the charity presentation she had spent weeks preparing. Every meticulous detail, every practiced phrase, ran through her head as she navigated the crowded room. And then she saw him. Tall. Dark. Unapologetically commanding. Dante Blackwood. He wasn't merely handsome, he was a force. Broad shoulders draped in a tailored suit that looked impossibly sharp, dark hair slicked back, and eyes that could freeze fire. He was speaking to someone, laughing, charming, but the moment their gazes collided, the world seemed to stop. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Something inside her stirred, a caution she couldn't ignore, a heat she didn't want to feel. His gaze pinned her, intense and dangerous, like he could see through every layer of her carefully constructed defenses. She shook her head, trying to clear the intrusive thoughts. It's just a man. A billionaire, someone used to attention, used to commanding rooms. But a whisper in her chest told her otherwise. Something primal. Something dark. Her heels clicked across the marble, and she attempted to refocus on her colleagues nearby, but her eyes kept straying back to him. And he was watching her. Not the polite, casual glance of a stranger, but something far more deliberate, measured, predatory even. Dante's lips curved into a subtle smirk, almost imperceptible, but it carried weight. It was a challenge. A promise. A warning. Evelyn's stomach tightened. She didn't know why she felt exposed, as if he could unravel every hidden thought, every unspoken fear. The air around him seemed charged, almost alive. She forced herself to breathe and reminded herself she wasn't alone in this room, that countless people were milling about, yet it was as if no one else existed. A voice nearby startled her. Evelyn? Are you okay? It was her colleague, smiling nervously. Yes, I'm fine, she stammered, her voice tighter than she intended. She glanced back at Dante one more time, and he was gone. Her chest heaved as she shook off the sudden flush of panic and excitement. He was just a man, she repeated silently, trying to convince herself. But deep down, a part of her knew the truth, it wasn't just that. Somewhere in the recesses of her mind, a warning whispered, a shadow of instinct she had learned to trust. And it told her something she wasn't ready to admit yet. Dante Blackwood would not be forgotten. And the moment their eyes met, neither of them could pretend it was accidental. Chapter 2, A Warning in the Shadows. The parking garage was silent except for the echo of Evelyn's heels tapping against the concrete. The gala's glitter still clung to her skin like a ghost of a world she didn't belong in. She exhaled, fishing her keys from her purse. Then. A shift in the air. A ripple of something wrong. A figure moved where no one should have been. Evelyn froze mid-step, fingers tightening around her keys. Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Who's there?" she whispered, though she wasn't sure she wanted an answer. From the darkness, a silhouette stepped forward, broad shoulders, a deliberate stride, a presence that made the shadows cling to him like loyal servants. Dante Blackwood. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low, almost a growl. It vibrated in her bones, ancient and dangerous. Moonlight slipped through the narrow window, glinting off his eyes. Gold. Bright gold. Not human. Evelyn's breath stuttered. "Your eyes, they weren't like that before." He didn't deny it. "You need to leave," Dante said, scanning the garage with a predator's tension. "Now." "That's not an answer," she whispered. He stepped closer. Too close. His scent, cedar, storm winds, something wild, wrapped around her. His control seemed to fray at the edges. "I warned you to stay away from me," he said, voice thick with something between restraint and regret. "Because danger follows you, Evelyn. And it's closer than you think." Her throat tightened. "Why? Why me?" His gaze locked on hers, intense enough to steal her breath. "Because something out there has marked you," he said. "And because I—" He cut himself off, jaw clenching. Too much said. Too dangerous. She stepped back instinctively, but Dante followed with a slow, measured step, eyes flickering with an emotion she couldn't name. "You should be afraid of me," he murmured. "I am," she admitted softly. "But I'm also not." His expression darkened, torn between fury and fascination. For a moment, Evelyn saw the man beneath the billionaire facade, the one made of secrets and shadows. A low, distant snarl echoed from the far end of the garage. Dante's head snapped toward the sound, every muscle coiling tight. Evelyn's heart plunged. "What was that?" she whispered. "Trouble," Dante said. His voice changed, deeper, edged with something feral. "Get in the car. Now." "Dante." He stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body as the snarl came again, closer this time. His shoulders broadened, breath quickened, fingers curling like claws straining to emerge. Evelyn stared at the man she'd just met, transforming into something not human right before her eyes. And yet, she felt safer behind him than she'd ever felt in her life. "Evelyn," he said without turning, voice now an inhuman growl, "get in the car." This time, she didn't argue. Chapter 3, Strange Happenings. The days that followed were a blur of unease. Evelyn tried to convince herself that what she'd seen in the parking garage, the glowing eyes, the snarl echoing through concrete, had been a trick of adrenaline and dim lighting. People imagined strange things under stress. But her world was no longer behaving the way it used to. It began with shadows. They slipped along the corners of her apartment, subtle but unmistakable, as if someone, or something, was pacing just out of sight. When she turned, the shapes dissolved into stillness. Then came the whispers. Soft, breathless. A language she didn't know yet somehow understood. Not words, but feelings, warning, longing, hunger. They threaded through the silence of her home, curling around her like invisible fingers. She told herself it was exhaustion. Stress. Overwork. But then the full moon rose. And everything changed. Evelyn woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heart racing as if she'd been running. Her skin tingled, alive, electric, and her reflection in the mirror showed pupils slightly dilated, almost luminous. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. What's happening to me? The next morning, her senses felt sharper. The scent of rain before it fell. The distant hum of engines blocks away. A strange ache beneath her skin, like something dormant stretching its limbs. That was when she saw him. Dante stood across the street from her office building, half hidden behind a street lamp, He didn't approach. He didn't speak. He simply watched her with an intensity that pierced straight through glass, concrete, logic. Golden eyes, human this time, but just barely, locked on hers. A jolt of recognition shot through her. Not simple attraction. Something older, something that made her breath catch. She looked away for a heartbeat, and he was gone. Later, at the grocery store. At the cafe near her building. Outside her apartment, though he kept his distance. Always watching. Always there. Evelyn told herself she should feel violated, frightened. But instead, a strange comfort threaded through the fear. His presence steadied her, grounding the chaos inside her. And the pull between them. It was no longer subtle. Every time his gaze found hers from the shadows, something deep in her chest tightened, tugging toward him. Not physically, but instinctively, as if the universe itself insisted on their collision. She tried to ignore it, to bury the truth beneath meetings and coffee and normalcy. But the whispering shadows grew bolder. The nights grew stranger. The full moon approached again. And the thread between her and Dante? It was pulling tighter, and tighter, as if preparing her for something she could no longer outrun. Chapter 4, The First Moonlight Rescue. The night air felt wrong. Too still. Too watchful. Too alive. Evelyn hugged her coat closer as she walked home, pretending she didn't notice the strange prickle beneath her skin, the same electric hum that always intensified with the full moon. She told herself it was coincidence. Stress. Overthinking. But the moon above her was a silver wound in the sky, bright enough to bleed into every alley and rooftop. And tonight, its light felt like it was calling her. She ignored the feeling. She ignored the tightening in her chest. She ignored Dante's warnings replaying in her head. Stay away, Evelyn. You have no idea what hunts you. She took one more step toward her apartment, and the world shattered. A low growl rolled through the alleyway behind her, too deep to be human, too guttural to be anything normal. Evelyn froze, breath locking in her lungs. The growl grew louder, closer, vibrating through the pavement. Hello, she whispered, even though she knew whatever was there wasn't going to answer. The shadow moved. Too fast. Too silent. Too big. A creature, taller than any man, hunched, sinewed with unnatural muscle, lunged from the darkness, its eyes burning crimson. Its snarl split the night. Evelyn stumbled back, terror rooting her feet to the ground. She tried to scream. Nothing came out. The creature's claws flashed. And then the world erupted in a blur of motion. A second shadow slammed between them with bone-breaking force, knocking the attacker aside. The alley filled with the sound of cracking pavement, snarls, and something primal tearing the night apart. Evelyn blinked, heart pounding so hard she thought her ribs might burst. The man who stepped forward wasn't Dante. Not the billionaire she'd seen at the gala. Not the sharp-suited figure who watched her from a distance. This version of him was unleashed. His body shifted before her eyes, bones reshaping with impossible fluid grace. Muscles expanded, skin rippling as fur erupted across his arms and spine. His hands elongated into lethal claws, and his eyes, his beautiful, haunting eyes, burned molten gold. A wolf. A predator. A king of something ancient and powerful. He didn't hesitate. Dante lunged at her attacker with devastating precision, fangs flashing in the moonlight. The two creatures collided, snarling, rolling across the ground with savage, brutal elegance. Evelyn pressed a hand over her mouth, trembling as she watched. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet she couldn't move. She was transfixed, by fear, yes, but also by the breathtaking, terrifying beauty of Dante's true form. Within moments, the fight was over. Her attacker fled, whimpering into the darkness. Dante didn't chase. Instead, he turned slowly toward her, his massive wolf form inching into the moonlight. He was enormous, towering, muscular, fur-like midnight steel. Power radiated from him in waves, but something else did too, something warm, protective, unspoken. He approached her carefully, lowering himself so he wouldn't tower over her. When his golden eyes met hers, the fear inside her didn't disappear, but it changed. Softened. Melted. "Dante," she breathed. His form rippled, bones reshaping with elegant ease. Moments later, he knelt before her as a man again, shirt torn, chest rising and falling, eyes still burning with the glow of the wolf. He reached for her chin, tilting her face up to his. "You're hurt," he murmured, voice rough from the shift. I'm okay," she whispered, though her entire body trembled. His thumb brushed her jaw in a gesture so gentle it stole her breath. "You shouldn't have been out here alone tonight." His voice deepened, threaded with something possessive and ancient. "Not on a full moon. Not when they're hunting." Her heart stuttered. "Who's hunting me?" His lips grazed her ear, dangerously close, voice a low growl. "Everyone who wants what's mine." Heat shot through her at the words, not fear, but something far more dangerous. "Yours," she whispered. Dante's gaze locked onto hers, molten and claiming. "You're mine, Evelyn," he said, each word an oath. "And you don't run from me." Before she could breathe, he leaned closer, pressing his forehead to hers in a gesture that felt intimate, ancient, binding. Moonlight wrapped around them, and she knew. This was the first of his moonlit claims. And it would not be the last. Chapter 5: Resistance and Intrigue. Evelyn woke with a sharp gasp, her sheets tangled around her like remnants of a forgotten struggle. Moonlight no longer cut through her room, the sun had risen, but the memory of last night clung to her skin. Her mind insisted it was impossible. Men didn't become wolves. Creatures didn't leap from alley shadows. Billionaires didn't kneel before trembling women and claim them under moonlight. But her body, the trembling in her limbs, the faint ache where his hand had cupped her jaw, the warmth pulsing low in her belly, told her it had been real. Too real. She pressed a hand to her chest, swallowing hard. This can't be happening. But it was. Because Dante Blackwood didn't stay in the shadows anymore. He stepped boldly into her daylight. The first coincidence happened at the cafe near her office. Evelyn slipped inside, desperate for caffeine to anchor her sanity. She ordered her usual and turned straight into Dante's chest. His hand caught her waist reflexively, fingers firm and warm through her blouse. A shiver tore through her at the contact, unwanted but undeniable. "You look pale," he murmured, voice velvet over steel. "Rough night?" Her throat tightened. "You know why." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, dangerous, knowing. "Do I?" She stepped back, fighting the pull that dragged her closer to him instead. "You can't just appear everywhere I go." He lifted her cup from the counter and handed it to her, fingers brushing hers in a deliberate whisper of contact. "Evelyn," he said softly, "if you truly think any of this is coincidence, you haven't been paying attention." His eyes flared gold, not fully, not like the night before, but enough to steal her breath. Enough to remind her of the beast beneath his skin. Enough to remind her of the way he'd murmured, "You're mine." She fled the cafe before her knees could betray her. But Dante wasn't done. By afternoon, her carefully structured world unraveled further. During an executive meeting, a space where she once felt confident, composed, in control, Dante walked in as casually as if he owned the building. Which, she quickly realized with horror, he did. Or at least his company did. Conversations halted. Executives straightened. Her pulse stumbled. He didn't acknowledge anyone else. His gaze locked on her instantly, a slow, devastating once-over that made her toes curl inside her heels. "Miss Hart," he greeted, voice all dark silk and command, a word. Her boss practically stammered. "Oh, of course. Anything you need, Mr. Blackwood." Evelyn stood, furious at her body for trembling at the sight of him. The moment they stepped into the hallway, she hissed, "Stop following me." "I'm not following," he said calmly. "I'm watching." "Dante." He stepped closer, and the air shifted, thick, charged, magnetic. "Do you know what last night awakened, Evelyn?" "No," she whispered. He brushed his fingers along the back of her hand, barely a touch, but enough to send heat spiraling up her arm. Her breath caught. "A pull," he murmured, "a bond neither of us can ignore. I warned you to stay away, but every instinct in me," his thumb grazed the inside of her wrist, finding her racing pulse, his voice dropping to a growl. "Refuses to let you go." Her knees weakened. Heat licked through her veins, frightening and irresistible. "Stop," she breathed. He released her hand with a slow, lingering slide that felt more intimate than a kiss. "If you truly wanted me to, you wouldn't be shaking right now." Her cheeks burned. "I'm shaking because I'm angry." No, his eyes flicked down her body, then back to her lips. "You're shaking because you feel it too." Before she could protest, before she could summon logic to fight the truth humming inside her, Dante stepped back. But he didn't disappear. Didn't retreat into shadows. Didn't pretend last night meant nothing. He simply stood there, watching her with the same unstoppable pull that had haunted her dreams. "Evelyn," he said softly, almost reverently, "this is only the beginning." And with that, he left her standing there. Breathless, furious, and dangerously intrigued. Chapter 6: Secrets Begin to Surface. Sleep became a stranger. Evelyn spent the night tossing, turning, reliving Dante's touch, the way his fingers had brushed her wrist as if he were memorizing her, claiming her. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the phantom weight of his hand against her skin, heard the low growl threaded through his voice. It wasn't normal. It wasn't logical. And it wasn't going away. By morning, she'd made her decision. If she wanted answers, she had to go backward, into the part of her life she'd always ignored, her mother's side of the family, full of half-remembered stories and cryptic warnings. The dusty boxes in her grandmother's attic smelled of cedar and forgotten years. Evelyn knelt among them, the dim light from the small window casting long shadows over stacks of old journals, brittle letters, and black and white photographs. She sifted through them with trembling hands. At first, it was nothing unusual: family recipes, travel photos, quaint postcards from distant places. But deeper in the box, wrapped carefully in a faded silk cloth, she found something that made her throat tighten. A journal. Bound in cracked leather, the edges worn smooth. Her grandmother's handwriting looped across the first page. "To the ones who will feel the call." A chill shivered through her. She flipped through the pages, scanning hastily written entries, mentions of moonlit gatherings, ancient oaths, the old bloodline tied to wolves who walked as men. Her grandmother had written about a connection, rare, feared, revered, that only awakened once in a generation, a connection of instinct, of destiny, of power. Evelyn's pulse hammered as she read, "Some partnerships are not chosen. They are summoned." The journal spoke of a pack, long dissolved or hidden, whose lineage mingled with her own. A warning echoed through the final pages: if the bond awakens, the alpha will find you. You cannot run from what your blood remembers. Her breath caught. Blood. Bond. Awakening. It all pointed toward one unbearable truth: her reaction to Dante wasn't a coincidence. It was inherited, ancient, inevitable. Before she could process it, the doorbell rang downstairs. Evelyn froze. No one knew where she was today. She stood slowly, heart pounding, and descended the creaky attic steps. The old house was silent except for the soft thrum of her pulse in her ears. She opened the door and found a letter on the doormat. Cream envelope. No stamp. No handwriting visible. Someone had delivered it by hand. She swallowed hard and tore it open. Inside was a single slip of paper, sharp and clean against her trembling fingers. You are destined for the Blackwood Alpha. Trust nothing but the bond that calls you to him. Her breath hitched, the words slicing through her carefully constructed denial. Blackwood. Dante. Her chest tightened with a mixture of panic and electric recognition. She stumbled back inside, clutching the note, but it felt heavier than paper, like prophecy. Her entire world, once rigid and rational, now felt like glass, fragile, shattering in slow motion. Everything Dante had said, everything he'd done, everything she felt. None of it was coincidence. She sank onto the couch, staring at the letter as if it might burst into flame. Destined. For him. The thought terrified her. But the terrifying part wasn't the destiny. It was the truth settling deep in her bones. Some part of her already knew. Some part of her had known from the moment their eyes met across the gala floor. Fate wasn't coming for her. It had already arrived. Chapter 7: Temptation and Risk. Dante Blackwood was becoming a ghost she could touch. Everywhere Evelyn turned, he was there, close enough to unsettle her, far enough to make her crave the next moment he stepped into her orbit. The encounters were never random. At lunch, she found him seated in her favorite corner of the cafe, reading a book he hadn't even bothered to open. His gaze had lifted the moment she walked in, warm and commanding. In the elevator, the doors slid shut and he stepped inside at the last second, as if fate held the button for him. The confined space made the air feel heavy. Charged. His scent, dark cedar and something wilder, wrapped around her. Once, late at night, she walked the quiet streets to clear her head, and he appeared beside her with silent confidence, matching her pace as though he had always been meant to occupy the space at her side. He never touched her unless she let him. He never pushed beyond what her trembling resolve could handle. But every moment with him was temptation sharpened to a blade's edge. The rooftop evening happened by accident, or at least that's what she told herself. Work had run late. Her thoughts were a tangled mess of destiny, bloodlines, and moonlit battles she didn't understand. She'd climbed to the private rooftop terrace to breathe, to escape the pounding chaos in her mind. The city stretched beneath her like a sea of stars. Cold wind brushed her skin. She felt, for a precious moment, alone. Then the door clicked open. Evelyn stiffened as Dante stepped out of the shadows, a silhouette framed by the city lights, impossibly tall, devastatingly composed, his eyes reflecting the glow of the skyline. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said softly. She swallowed. "I needed space." "You don't want space from me." "I should," she whispered. "You should," he agreed, stepping closer, slowly, deliberately, like a predator giving its prey the illusion of choice. "But you won't." Her heart thrashed against her ribs. "You think you know what I want?" His gaze dropped to her mouth. "I feel what you want." Heat shot through her, hot enough to burn reason to ash. Dante closed the distance until only inches separated them. The wind tugged at her hair, brushing it against his chest. He lifted a hand, hesitating, giving her a chance to step back. She didn't. His fingertips grazed her cheek, feather-light, yet the touch sent a tremor spiraling through her entire body. She felt it deep, bone-deep, soul-deep, like the echo of a memory she'd never lived. "Every time I'm near you," Dante murmured, "the bond intensifies." "Stop calling it that," she breathed, even as her body leaned into him against her will. "It's the truth," he whispered, tracing her jaw. "You feel it. Your blood knows me." Her lips parted in a sharp inhale. He leaned closer, not kissing her, but close enough that his breath warmed her mouth. Close enough to flood her senses with him. "You can fight it if you want," Dante said, voice deep, rough with desire he wasn't trying to hide. "You can deny every pull, every instinct, every part of yourself that reaches for me." His thumb brushed her lower lip, and she shivered violently. "But understand this, Evelyn." His voice dropped to a husky growl. "Every part of me wants you. Every full moon. Every breath. Every heartbeat." Her defenses crumpled under the weight of his words. Fear and longing tangled inside her, sharp and overwhelming. She wanted to step back. She wanted to step closer. She wanted to run. She wanted to fall into him. Her voice trembled. "Dante, this is dangerous." His touch slid to the nape of her neck, fingers threading gently into her hair. "So am I," he whispered. "But I will never harm you." The city lights flickered beneath them. The wind howled softly. The world seemed to pause, waiting for her choice. Evelyn's breath hitched, her resistance unraveling thread by thread as she stared into his molten, too honest eyes. She wasn't falling. She had already begun to drown. Chapter 8, Rival Alpha Emerges. Kieran arrived like a storm wrapped in silk, smooth, controlled, but carrying a danger that prickled against the skin before he even spoke. No one knew exactly when he had come into the city, or why. But everyone felt the shift in the air the moment he did. Evelyn felt it too. She noticed him first at a charity gala Dante had insisted she attend with him. For appearance, he'd said, though his hand resting possessively on her lower back told a different truth. The room glittered with crystal chandeliers and murmured conversations, but all of that faded when Kieran stepped through the entrance. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Strikingly handsome with moon-kissed silver hair and eyes that glowed faintly, unnervingly, even under the warm lights. He walked with an effortless confidence, as though the world already belonged to him and he was simply choosing which part to take next. And the moment his gaze landed on Evelyn, something in his expression sharpened. Interest. Recognition. Claim. He approached with a slow, predatory grace. "Evelyn Grace," he said smoothly, his voice velvet over steel. "I've heard whispers. But none did you justice." Dante stiffened beside her. Evelyn didn't even realize she had edged slightly closer to him until his hand wrapped around her waist with quiet fury. Dante's aura rolled off him in waves, dark, territorial, ancient. "Kieran," Dante said, his voice cool but his wolf prowling beneath the surface. "I wasn't aware you were slithering around my city." Kieran smiled, completely unfazed. "Oh, I go wherever I'm welcomed. And sometimes," his eyes flicked to Evelyn, "where I'm needed." The air thickened. Something primal crackled between the two alphas, an invisible clash of dominance that made the chandeliers tremble. Evelyn swallowed. "Do you two know each other?" "Oh," Kieran said, gaze sliding back to her with a slow, appreciative sweep, "Dante and I share a long, complicated history. Old rivalries. Older secrets. And I see he hasn't told you a thing, he added softly, his tone dripping with dangerous intrigue. How interesting. Dante's grip tightened. Leave her out of this. Kieran ignored him completely, taking Evelyn's hand before she could pull away. He bowed slightly, brushing his lips close, too close, to her skin without touching. He didn't need to. The suggestion alone sent a chill down her spine. I look forward, he murmured, to getting to know you properly. Dante yanked her hand back. Crowd gasped. Kieran only chuckled, stepping backward like a man who had already won something. You belong with me, Dante growled under his breath, so low only she could hear. His eyes were wild, glowing amber, his control fraying. He's not just after you. He's after everything. And I will not let him touch what's mine. But as Kieran disappeared into the sea of glittering guests, Evelyn felt an invisible thread tightening around her. Not a bond. Not a choice. A threat. Kieran wasn't just a rival. He was a predator circling his prize, and Dante's jealousy was nothing compared to the danger this new alpha brought with him. Chapter 9, Revelation of the Pack. Dante didn't give her time to prepare, didn't offer explanations or warnings. He simply appeared at her apartment door at dusk, jaw tight, eyes glowing with an intensity that made her breath catch. It's time, he said. For what? For them to know you. He didn't say who, but Evelyn felt it. A pulse in the air. A shift in gravity. Something ancient awakening around her. The drive took them past the glittering heart of the city, then into a secluded forest where the skyscrapers dissolved into shadows. At the end of a winding path stood a colossal mansion, dark stone, sprawling wings, huge windows glowing with soft amber light. It looked regal and predatory. Like a lair masquerading as a home. Inside, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Warmth. Power. Watchfulness. Every conversation halted as they stepped into the grand hall. Dozens of eyes, human and not, turned toward Evelyn. Some curious. Some resentful. Some cold enough to make her bones tighten. Dante rested a protective hand on her lower back, guiding her deeper into the den. They won't harm you, he murmured, though the strain in his voice said he was ready to tear apart anyone who dared try. But they will test you. The first test came almost immediately. A silver-furred wolf, large and imposing despite its aging muzzle, stared at her from across the hall. Its eyes glowed with wary intelligence. Slowly, deliberately, it bared its teeth, not in threat, but in appraisal. A question. Are you worthy of him? Evelyn's heart hammered, but she didn't look away. A low rumble of approval vibrated through the room. Before she could breathe, a young wolf, a lean, fiery brown adolescent with too much energy and too little discipline, lunged from the side. Not to attack, but to startle. To see if she would flinch. She stumbled back, but Dante moved faster. In a blur of motion, he caught the wolf mid-pounce, pinning him with a single hand. His voice dropped into a lethal growl that shook the walls. Enough. The young wolf whimpered and backed away instantly. Dante's gaze softened only when he turned back to Evelyn, brushing a thumb over her trembling hand. I told you, they test strength. Not fear. More wolves gathered, some shifting into human form with seamless grace, others remaining in their lupin skins. Men and women with fierce eyes and quiet power formed a circle around them. Their whispers filled the air like rustling leaves. The mate. The outsider. The human, is she worthy? Will she break him, or save him? Evelyn swallowed hard, overwhelmed yet inexplicably drawn in. There was something breathtaking and haunting about being surrounded by these creatures, this family bound by blood, instinct, and moonlight. Finally, Dante pulled her forward, turning to face the full pack. You question her, he said, voice echoing with alpha command. You test her. You watch her. That is your right. His fingers intertwined with hers, firm and unshakable. But understand this, she is not just my mate. His gaze swept over the room, fierce and unyielding. She is part of us. Every danger we face, she faces. Every enemy that rises against us, rises against her. Every full moon that calls to our blood, calls to hers too. A ripple of shock tore through the pack. Evelyn's breath caught. He wasn't asking for acceptance. He was declaring it, and the weight of his words settled deep in her chest like a second heartbeat, steady, powerful, terrifying. She should have been afraid. A sane person would be. But all Evelyn felt was an intoxicating blend of awe, desire, and a strange, overwhelming sense of belonging. For the first time, she wasn't standing beside Dante's world. She was stepping into it. And the pack knew it. Chapter 10, Full Moon Confession. The night was too quiet. The forest breathed in silver as the full moon rose, its light spilling across the clearing in shimmering waves. Evelyn had followed Dante without question, drawn by something deeper than logic, heavier than instinct. Every step echoed her racing heartbeat. He stopped at the center of the clearing, bathed in moonlight. For once, Dante didn't mask the storm behind his eyes. His control, usually sharp, unbreakable, was frayed at the edges. The alpha was struggling. With himself. With her. With the bond neither of them fully understood. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, as though dragged from the deepest part of him. I've been trying to stay away, he said, turning toward her. The light caught the gold in his irises, igniting it like fire. To protect you from what I am. From what this bond demands. Evelyn's breath hitched. His confession felt like a crack in the world, something forbidden finally slipping through. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, every movement controlled despite the tension vibrating through him. But the full moon, his jaw tightened. It strips away the lies we tell ourselves. It shows the truth we're too afraid to admit. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She could feel it, his power pressing against her skin, his longing reaching for her even when he didn't touch her. What truth, she whispered, even though some part of her already knew. Dante's gaze locked on hers, fierce and vulnerable all at once. That I need you, he said, voice almost a growl. Not as a fleeting obsession. Not as a distraction. He took another step, until his body cast a long shadow over hers. But as my anchor. My calm, the only one who can steady the wolf inside me when the moon calls too loudly. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The air was thick, electric. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, a touch so gentle it broke something inside her. Tears welled in her eyes, unbidden. Dante, she breathed, trembling. Look at me, he murmured, his thumb sweeping over her skin with devastating tenderness. Every time you run, every time you doubt this, it drives the wolf wild. But when you look at me like this, his voice deepened, soft and reverent. I feel human again. Her tears slipped down her cheek, shimmering in the moonlight. Fear twisted inside her, fear of him, of herself, of the pull between them that was deepening beyond reason. I don't know if I can trust it, she whispered. It was the truth. The bond scared her. The intensity scared her. He scared her. Dante leaned in, forehead nearly touching hers, his breath warm against her lips. You already have, he whispered back. The words slid through her like a blade wrapped in silk, painful, undeniable, intimate. Because he was right. She had trusted him. In the alley. With the pack. Even now, when every instinct screamed to run, she stayed rooted in place, drawn to him like tides to the moon. A howl echoed in the distance, one of Dante's wolves feeling the rise of the full moon. The sound vibrated through the forest, through her bones. Dante's breath hitched, his body shuddering subtly as the wolf inside him responded. His control was slipping. He pressed his forehead fully to hers, eyes squeezed shut. Stay with me, he breathed. Just tonight. Don't run. Evelyn's heart trembled. Under the silver glow, under the weight of his confession, there was only one truth left: she didn't want to run. Chapter 11, Secrets Threaten. The city at night felt heavier than usual, as if it held its breath in anticipation. Evelyn walked beside Dante, her senses on edge, every instinct alert. Something was coming. She could feel it, the undercurrent of tension that had woven itself into the very air since Kieran's arrival. Dante's presence beside her was a constant anchor, yet it could not shield her from the whispers of danger creeping closer. They're planning, he muttered, voice low, almost lost in the hum of the night. Kieran and his pack, they see you as leverage. The key to undermining me. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She had suspected rivalry, tension, danger, but the words carried weight far heavier than she had imagined. Leverage, how? She asked, voice trembling despite the composure she fought to maintain. Dante didn't answer immediately. Instead, his golden gaze swept over the skyline, sharp, vigilant, every muscle coiled like a predator ready to strike. Weakness in a mate is never ignored, he finally said. And they think they can use you. But no one touches what's mine. Later that evening, Evelyn returned home, heart still racing from the tension outside. She had tried to bury the thought of Kieran's shadow, tried to focus on the bond forming between her and Dante, but something in her blood, something primal and unrelenting, demanded more answers. She turned to the journals she had found in her grandmother's attic, digging deeper into the past than ever before. The fragile pages whispered long-forgotten truths, secrets stitched into the very marrow of her lineage. And then she found it, a mention of Dante Blackwood. Not the present Dante, not the alpha she had begun to trust, not the man who had claimed her under the full moon, but a past drenched in betrayal. One page told of a coup within his pack, a trusted ally turning against him in a desperate attempt to steal his throne. Another revealed a forbidden bond, an allegiance he had broken to protect someone else, someone he had loved and lost. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Her fingers shook as she read. The man she had begun to trust, the alpha she had slowly let in, had survived treachery that could have destroyed him, but it had left scars invisible to anyone but those who knew where to look. Her breath hitched. Dante, she whispered to the shadows, even though he wasn't there. Doubt clawed at her. Could she trust someone with such a past? Could she risk herself on a bond so primal and consuming when history suggested betrayal lingered like a phantom? When Dante arrived later that night, his expression was unreadable, a mask honed by years of ruling, hunting, surviving. But when his eyes met hers, all the walls she had built began to crumble. You're thinking about him, he said softly, voice low and steady, brushing a lock of hair from her face. About Kieran. About the past you just discovered. Evelyn hesitated. I don't know what to think anymore. Your past, the betrayal, everything. He stepped closer, closing the distance until the heat from his body pressed against hers. His gaze pierced hers, unwavering, molten and fierce. Listen to me, Evelyn, he murmured, voice rough with emotion. I am not my past mistakes. I am not their lies. I am, this. His hand curved around hers, warm and strong. I am the bond you feel in your blood, in your soul. That connection is real. Primal. Unbreakable. Her breath hitched. Every doubt, every fear, every shadow that had crept into her mind faltered under the weight of his gaze. It was impossible to resist the certainty in him, the truth in the pull between them. You're right, she whispered, her voice trembling, yet resolute. It's real. It's me, and you. Dante's lips brushed her temple in a fleeting, tender kiss, a vow, a promise, a claim. The night hummed around them, the shadows and danger pressing close, yet unable to touch the unshakable bond forming between them. Even with betrayal and threats looming, Evelyn felt it. Nothing, not Kieran, not the past, not the darkness, could sever the connection Dante had anchored deep within her soul. And for the first time, she believed it. Chapter 12, The Billionaire's Plan. Dante's private jet sliced through the night sky, city lights shrinking beneath them, the wind carrying a quiet hum through the cabin. Evelyn sat across from him, knees pressed together, fingers nervously twisting the edge of her coat. The tension between them was thick, almost palpable, yet it carried the warm, grounding weight of his presence. Dante leaned back in his chair, hands steepled, golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim cabin light. Kieran is not a man who plays fair, he said, voice low, measured, and he will not stop until he claims you, or destroys everything I've built. Evelyn swallowed. The thought made her stomach twist with fear, yet part of her thrilled at the danger, the risk that had become inseparable from the pull of his presence. We need a plan, she whispered, the words trembling from both fear and anticipation. Dante's lips curved in a brief, knowing smile. I have one. But it requires patience, precision, and absolute trust. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a near purr. I'll leverage my resources, my pack, my everything. Kieran and his allies won't see it coming. They'll think they're hunting us. But in reality, we will be the ones controlling the game. Evelyn's pulse raced. Her hand brushed against his, tentative, seeking, and he captured it without hesitation, fingers entwining with hers. The warmth of his touch ignited something deep in her, something primal. And while we execute it, she asked, heart hammering. Dante's gaze softened, golden fire shifting to molten amber. We survive, he said simply. And we remember this. He traced her jawline with his thumb, a touch so intimate it made her knees weak. Every stolen moment, every look, every heartbeat. No one can take that from us. Later, in the private sanctuary of his penthouse, Dante's plan unfolded not just in strategy, but in stolen luxuries. Evelyn felt the thrill of a life she had never known, tender yet dangerous, decadent yet suffused with desire. A quiet dinner in the penthouse garden, soft lanterns swayed in the night breeze, casting golden pools of light across the terrace. Dante poured wine with an elegance that made her pulse skip, his hand brushing hers as he handed her the glass. The contact lingered, deliberate, magnetic. You're thinking about Kieran again, he said softly, eyes smoldering. I can't help it, she admitted, voice low. He's dangerous, and I can feel it. Dante's lips brushed her temple, a fleeting kiss filled with promise and claim. Danger is irrelevant, he murmured. Not with me. Not with us. A midnight drive followed, the city lights stretching like rivers of gold and silver. His hand occasionally brushed hers, occasionally rested lightly on the small of her back, each touch sending currents of fire through her veins. I could never let him have you, Dante said, voice deep, unwavering, shadowed by a wolf's growl that lingered beneath his words. Not for the world, not for anything. Kieran doesn't understand what he's dealing with.
He doesn't know what it means to have a bond like ours. Evelyn's chest tightened, her breath catching. And the bond, it's real, she whispered. Dante's thumb traced the back of her hand in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Primal, he said. I feel it in my blood, in my bones. Every full moon, every heartbeat, every moment I'm near you, you are mine. And no one, no threat, no rival, no shadow, can ever change that. The drive ended, but their closeness lingered, even under the weight of impending danger, under the shadow of a rival alpha plotting against them, desire and trust grew stronger. Each glance, each brush of fingers, each fleeting kiss in the penthouse garden or private jet cabin became a tether, a promise that no one could sever. Kieran could plan. Kieran could strike. But he would never touch what Dante had claimed, and what Evelyn's heart had already surrendered. Chapter 13, The Danger Closes In. The city felt different that night. Too still. Too silent. As if every shadow was holding its breath, waiting. Evelyn sensed it first, a strange heaviness in the air, a chill that crept across her skin despite the warm breeze rolling off the buildings. Dante's hand tightened around hers the moment the wind shifted, carrying with it a scent only he could truly understand. Kieran's pack. Clothes. Hunting. Dante's eyes flashed molten gold, bright enough to cut through the darkness like wildfire. His voice dropped into a deep, primal growl that vibrated through her bones. Stay close, Evelyn. Do not let go of my hand. Not for a second. She nodded, nails digging into his palm, her pulse a frantic drumbeat echoing in her ears. Fear quailed in her stomach, cold and sharp, but it wasn't enough to drown out the fierce trust she felt whenever Dante was near. They walked faster, boots striking the pavement of a dim, narrow street that cut between towering buildings. Street lights flickered overhead, sputtering as if reacting to the presence stalking them from unseen corners. Then it happened. A sound, low, guttural, wrong. A growl that didn't belong in a city. Dante shoved Evelyn behind him with one swift motion. The shadows moved. And then they exploded. Figures lunged from the darkness, eyes glowing, jaws parted, teeth gleaming wetly under the blinking lights. Wolves twisted mid-air, half-shifted bodies contorted with rage and hunger. Kieran's pack didn't hesitate, they attacked with the fury of predators that had been waiting for this moment. Evelyn gasped, stumbling back, but Dante didn't move like a man. He moved like a storm. In one breath, he shifted, bones cracking, muscles stretching, a powerful wolf exploding from within. His wolf was massive, larger than any creature she had ever imagined, black fur rippling with raw power, golden eyes burning with deadly promise. He struck first. A blur of alpha power. A roar that shook the street. His jaws clamped onto the nearest attacker, throwing the smaller wolf through the air like a rag doll. Another lunged at Evelyn, but Dante was faster, his massive body blocked her completely, claws slicing through the air in a deadly arc that sent the wolf skidding across the concrete. Evelyn pressed against the wall, trembling, breath shallow, but her eyes stayed locked on Dante, on the terrifying majesty of what he truly was. Alpha. Protector. Predator. Hers. Moonlight caught on his fur, turning him into a shadow carved from silver and darkness. Every movement he made was lethal, precise, an executioner of anyone who dared come near her. Dante, she whispered, voice cracking with awe and terror. 3 more wolves circled, growling, stalking. Kieran's scent lingered in the distance, observing, assessing, waiting for a moment Dante grew weak or distracted. But Dante was relentless. He leapt, a whirlwind of fur and fury, tackling one wolf and pinning it with crushing force. He snarled, a sound so primal and possessive it sent chills up Evelyn's spine. The remaining wolves hesitated, fear flickering in their glowing eyes. They understood. Even outnumbered, Dante was an apex predator. The Alpha King. One final slash, one final snarl, and the pack scattered, limping, wounded, defeated. Their shadows disappeared down the alleyway, melting back into the night they came from. Silence returned. Heavy. Breathless. Dante shifted back slowly, body trembling with the intensity of the battle. The moment he regained human form, he stumbled forward, shirt torn, skin smeared with dirt and blood, muscles tense with adrenaline. Evelyn didn't hesitate, she ran to him. His arms caught her immediately, pulling her flush against his chest. His breath was ragged, his grip desperate, as if he needed to feel her heartbeat to calm his own. "Are you hurt?" he growled, checking her frantically, eyes wild with protective instinct. "No," she whispered, hands cupping his face. "Because of you. Dante, you saved me." His forehead rested against hers, breath hot against her lips. "You're mine to protect," he murmured, voice rough with lingering wolf. "Always." Her heart thundered, overwhelmed by fear, awe, and something deeper, something undeniable. For the first time, she understood the true scale of his power, and the depth of the bond pulling them together. And she clung to him, not because she was afraid, but because she never wanted to let him go. Chapter 14, Moonlit Surrender. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Only the distant rustle of leaves and the soft hum of the night surrounded them as Dante guided Evelyn deeper into the woods. The moon hung high, a silver lantern spilling light through the branches, painting Dante's skin in a glow that made him look both divine and dangerous. They reached a clearing wrapped in moonlight, a hidden sanctuary untouched by the chaos they had just escaped. Evelyn's breath trembled as she looked around, every tree felt like a witness, every whisper of wind like a confession waiting to be spoken. Dante turned to her slowly, as though afraid she might shatter if he moved too fast. "You're safe," he murmured, voice rough from the fight, from the fear of losing her. "I promise you, Evelyn, nothing will ever touch you while I'm breathing." She tried to respond, but her voice was swallowed by the thick knot in her throat. Her heart kept replaying the moment he shifted, how fiercely he fought for her, how instinctively he shielded her body with his own, how willingly he would have died to protect her. And now, here he was, looking at her as if she was the only thing anchoring him to sanity. Dante stepped closer until their breaths tangled, until she could feel the heat radiating off him like fire beneath the moon. "You don't need to fight me anymore," he whispered, lowering his forehead to hers. His voice broke on the last word, rich with honesty he could no longer hide. "You've already surrendered your heart." Evelyn's chest tightened. Every wall she had built, out of fear, out of pride, out of the lies she told herself about keeping distance, cracked under the weight of his words. She had run from this connection, denied it, fought it, but the truth was simple and devastating: she wanted him. She needed him. And she belonged to him just as fiercely as he belonged to her. Her fingers trembled as she lifted them to his jaw, tracing the faint scrapes from battle. "Dante." "I'm scared," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Not of you." Under the moonlight, something shifted, the air, the connection, the rhythm between their hearts. Evelyn felt herself falling, not downward, but deeper, into him. And this time, she didn't fight it. With a soft breath, she wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her body against his. Her surrender wasn't loud or dramatic. It was gentle, pure, and absolute, an offering of trust she had never given to anyone before. Dante exhaled shakily, his hands gripping her as if he feared she might disappear. His wolf settled beneath his skin, quiet and content for the first time in years. In his embrace, under the moon's silver blessing, their bond shifted from fragile to eternal. They stayed like that, two souls, two hearts, one destiny, wrapped in moonlight, surrendering to a love that felt both ancient and new. The forest held its breath. The moon watched in silence. And Evelyn knew, without doubt, without hesitation, there was no turning back. Chapter 15, Forever Marked. The mansion, once an intimidating fortress of glass, steel, and shadows, felt different the moment Evelyn stepped inside. The air seemed lighter, charged with a quiet anticipation. Wolves whispered in the hallways, their eyes following her with something far more profound than curiosity. Tonight, the Blackwood pack had gathered not for war, but for recognition. Dante's hand rested firmly at the small of her back as he led her toward the grand atrium, where dozens of wolves, human and shifted, stood waiting. Moonlight spilled through the towering windows, turning the polished floor into a shimmering pool of silver. It felt ceremonial, sacred, and completely overwhelming. Evelyn's heart quickened, her pulse a tremor under her skin. But Dante felt it, of course he did. His thumb brushed reassuring circles against her spine, grounding her. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and found nothing there but pride, and love strong enough to quiet her fears. He stepped forward, his voice carrying across the room with effortless command. Tonight, Dante declared, we acknowledge what the moon, the bond, and fate have already chosen. The pack fell silent, every gaze locked on them. She is not just my mate, he continued, voice deepening with emotion, but my equal. My protector, as I am hers. My strength, as I am hers. My forever. Evelyn's breath caught. No one had ever claimed her so fiercely, or so tenderly. Dante turned to her then, lifting her hand gently. Evelyn, he murmured, loud enough for all to hear, if you accept me, if you accept this life, I will mark you under the promise of loyalty, respect, and eternal devotion. Her chest tightened with an ache she couldn't name. Because somewhere along the chaos, the fear, the battles, she had found something she hadn't known she was missing. A home. A family. A place where she mattered. I accept, she whispered, though her voice shook. In an instant, warmth spread through Dante's expression, relief, joy, and something possessive that sent shivers across her skin. He leaned down, brushing his lips to the curve of her neck. The room held its breath as his canines grazed her skin, not hurting, just claiming. A spark ignited, shooting down her spine, a firestorm of emotion, desire, and bond. When his mark settled, glowing faintly with the magic of their connection, her heart swelled until she thought it might burst. A soft hum rippled through the pack, approval, acceptance, solidarity. In that moment, Dante wrapped his arm around her waist, holding her against him as though she were the anchor to his very soul. Kieran and his traitorous allies had already been dealt with, banished, stripped of power, their shadows no longer darkening Blackwood territory. Peace had returned, fragile but real, settling over the mansion like a long-awaited dawn. Evelyn looked around at the wolves who had once been strangers, and now bowed their heads to her with respect. Not out of fear, but loyalty. Belonging. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She had a place. A purpose. A bond that was unbreakable. Dante pressed a kiss to her marked skin, murmuring against her pulse, "You're mine, and I'm yours. Forever." And Evelyn, for the first time in her life, felt the truth of it settle deep inside her. She was finally home. Chapter 16, Hidden Past Revealed. The morning after her marking, the Blackwood mansion felt different, not intimidating or unfamiliar, but warm, alive, almost humming with a sense of belonging. Evelyn walked through the sunlit hallways with a strange mixture of peace and anticipation. Something was shifting, something she couldn't quite name. That was when Dante approached her, a thick envelope in his hand. "It arrived for you," he said softly. Delivered by a courier who claimed it came from your grandmother's estate. Evelyn froze. Her grandmother had passed years ago, long before she'd ever heard the word wolf uttered in anything other than fairy tales. Her hands trembled as she took the envelope, the aged paper soft beneath her fingers, her name written in familiar looping handwriting. Her heart hammered. Grandmother knew. Dante stayed close but silent, giving her space as she opened the seal. Her breath caught as she unfolded the letter, delicate, ink slightly faded, but the words still powerful. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then the past has begun to call you home. You carry a bloodline older than the city you walk, older than the name you bear. Our family has always belonged to the wolves. The Blackwood line and ours have been intertwined for generations, by loyalty, by destiny, and by a bond that chooses its own time to awaken. Do not fear it. Do not run from it. The one who finds you, the one whose presence ignites your instincts, is the path fate always intended for you. Trust the pull. It will lead you where you are meant to be. With love, your grandmother. Evelyn lowered the letter, tears stinging her eyes. Everything, every instinct she'd fought, every moment of danger, every overwhelming encounter with Dante, clicked into place with startling clarity. She had been destined for him. Long before she met him. Long before she even understood herself. Fate had woven their paths together generations ago. Her throat tightened as she whispered, she knew all along. Dante stepped toward her, his presence warm and grounding. Gently, he took the letter from her trembling hands, scanning the words that bound their ancestries together. When he looked up, his expression was a mixture of awe and something deep, something reverent. You were never just a coincidence, he murmured. You were always meant to be part of us. Part of me. Evelyn felt her heart expand, her pulse quickening as she breathed in his truth. She wasn't an outsider. She wasn't a human caught in a supernatural storm. She wasn't an anomaly in Dante's world. She was the missing piece, the one who completed a bond generations in the making. A slow smile formed on her lips, gentle but full of newfound strength. I guess fate knew what it was doing, she whispered. Dante cupped her cheek, brushing his thumb over her skin with a tenderness that made her melt. It always does, he said, voice low and intimate. And it brought you home. And as Evelyn leaned into him, into her destiny, her heritage, and the man she was bound to, she realized something profound. She wasn't just following fate. She was stepping into who she had always been meant to become. Chapter 17, Alpha's Vow. The moon hung heavy and luminous in the sky, casting a silver glow across the secluded clearing behind the Blackwood mansion. The air was cool and reverent, almost sacred, as if the world itself paused to witness what was about to happen. Dante led Evelyn into the circle of lanterns glowing softly against the night. Each flame flickered in rhythm with the wind, illuminating the runic stones beneath their feet, ancient symbols that marked the ground where generations of Blackwood alphas had sworn their deepest oaths. But tonight was different. Tonight, the vow was not to a throne, not to power, not to a pack, it was to her. Dante turned to face her, the moon catching in his dark hair, highlighting the tension in his jaw and the intensity in his eyes. He looked like a man carved from power and devotion, untamed, unstoppable, and entirely hers. Evelyn, he said softly, his voice carrying through the still night like a promise carved into the wind. She swallowed, feeling her heartbeat pulse through her entire body. Yes? He reached out and took her hands, lifting them to his lips. The warmth of his breath against her skin sent shivers spiraling down her spine. You came into my world like a storm, he murmured. And yet you are the calm I never knew I needed. His thumb brushed over her knuckles as he continued, I fought the bond. I fought the moon. I fought myself. But in every life, in every fate, in every version of destiny, it has always been you. Her breath hitched. The world narrowed until it was only him, the man, the alpha, the wolf whose soul was now irrevocably tied to hers. A shift rippled through the clearing as his wolf stirred beneath the surface. His eyes flashed molten gold, his form flickering as the wolf pressed forward, brushing against his human side. Evelyn gasped softly. The raw power of his shifting aura wrapped around her, not frightening, but grounding. Comforting. Devotion in its most primal form. Dante lowered his forehead to hers, his voice a growl wrapped in tenderness. I vow to love you in every lifetime, even if the world burns, even if the moon fades, even if fate tries to tear you from me. I will find you. I will claim you. I will choose you. A single tear slid down Evelyn's cheek, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming force of the moment. The power of being seen. Chosen. Loved without condition. He placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms, strong, wild, undeniably real. And I choose you too, she whispered. In this life, and every lifetime after. Dante let out a breath that sounded almost like a growl of relief. Then, under the silver gaze of the moon, he pressed a kiss to her forehead, soft, reverent, sealing the vow. Around them, the lantern flames shifted, glowing brighter as if the ancient spirits of the Blackwood lineage acknowledged the bond. Evelyn felt it then, a warmth spreading through her, settling deep into her bones. She wasn't just Dante's mate. She was now woven into the legacy of alphas, tied to the moon, the pack, and the man who had vowed himself to her. She had found her equal. Her protector. Her love. Her forever. And nothing, not rival alphas, not fate, not even the shadows of the past, would ever break that vow. Chapter 18, Epilogue, Moonlit Forever. Months passed, and with them came a peace the Blackwood territory hadn't known in years. The city breathed easier. The pack moved with renewed strength. And Evelyn finally felt whole. The forest behind the mansion had become her sanctuary, an expanse of moonlit paths, whispering leaves, and quiet moments shared with the alpha who had turned her world upside down. Tonight, the full moon hung high above them, round and radiant, bathing the trees in liquid silver. Dante walked beside her, their fingers intertwined, the warmth of his hand grounding her in a way nothing else ever could. Every step was slow, deliberate, intimate, two hearts beating in the same rhythm. Dante glanced at her, a rare softness brightening his usually intense eyes. You know, he murmured, a faint smile tugging at his lips, I warned you to stay away. Evelyn laughed, a warm, genuine sound that melted into the cool night air. And yet, she teased, leaning into him, every full moon, you claimed my heart again. His laughter rumbled through his chest, deep and content. He pulled her closer until her head rested against him, her cheek brushing the mark that had changed her life forever. Every full moon, he repeated, voice dropping into that low, velvety tone that still made her breath catch. Every heartbeat. Every lifetime. Evelyn tilted her face toward him, and the world seemed to pause as their lips met, slow, lingering, filled with all the promises they no longer needed to speak aloud. Around them, the forest stood witness, the moon glowing brighter, the wind circling gently as if blessing the union fate had written long before either of them realized it. They pulled apart just enough to breathe, their foreheads touching, their futures intertwined as effortlessly as their fingers. No more running, Dante whispered. Never again, Evelyn answered. Together, they stepped deeper into the forest, their silhouettes swallowed by moonlight and soft shadows, two souls bound by destiny, power, and a love that refused to break. And as the night wrapped around them like a vow, one truth lingered in the air, they were forever. Forever marked, forever bound, forever theirs.
Thank you so much for listening to the novel. I truly hope you enjoyed this dark, addictive werewolf romance. If you did, don't forget to check out another popular story on this channel, Sold to the Lycan Prince, a powerful, emotional, and unforgettable paranormal romance you won't want to miss. Please subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share this audiobook to support more stories like this. Your engagement helps the channel grow and allows more listeners to discover these incredible worlds. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to share the next story with you.